I want to play a game. You've lived your life chain smoking every moment that you can, taking for granted the most important chemical of all, oxygen. In 90 seconds, this entire room will be filled with a deadly gas. What will you do when the one thing that can save you is in the small machine on the ground? The catch? There's only one tube. The device is strapped to your mouth and will remain locked until the timer is up, so you must find another way to your lungs. Live or die, the choice is yours.
With the release of Saw X, we now have 10 films in the Saw franchise. Somehow they made 10 movies out of this idea, but today I'm going to sit down and rank all the films. I made my way somehow through all of them over the course of the last 2 weeks, and then obviously put out my review of Saw X about 2 days ago now, and I'm actually quite excited to talk about these movies because as much as I don't like a lot of them, they still will be fun to talk about for many different reasons. I won't be spoiling any of these movies, but there will be some things with some of them that I maybe suggest certain things or say, yeah, and this reveal was stupid. Not saying the reveal, but saying that there is a reveal. Stuff like that will be said in this video, but nothing major spoiler-ish. But anyway, let's get into it. Coming in dead last is Saw 3D. Saw 3D is one of the worst films I've ever seen, and that hurts me to say because I love Chester Bennington so much, but this film completely ruins the timeline and common sense of the past movies, which already weren't great movies on their own, and the effects are just terrible. The blood looks hilariously bad, and there's just like every single scene in this movie is horrendous. The choices are terrible. There's just so much. I could probably make a 2-hour video on why this film is so terrible, but yeah, this is my new least favorite film of all time. Coming in number 9, we have Saw 5, and technically, like from a technical point of view, I would say this film is probably better than 4, but there's just no entertainment value here because we have characters that we, or at least I, don't give a shit about, doing stuff that is so pointless here. And the traps are okay at best, nothing crazy that sticks out in my mind. But this film, just like Saw 3D, adds a whole element that really makes you reflect back on the previous films and kind of takes away a lot from them. And it's hard to look at those movies the same way after some of the choices made in this one. Coming in number 8, we have Saw 6. Now, I will admit, some of the traps here are amazing. Shotgun Carousel is definitely an all-timer when it comes to Saw traps, but this film is filled with characters that I just don't care about. There are some moments here where it's like, yeah, these traps make you question your morals, but at the same time, I'm siding with Jigsaw on a lot of this stuff. Jigsaw, I should say, and I think that says something about the character writing overall of this movie. Coming in number 7, we have Saw 4. Now, the editing and transitions in this movie are laughable, as in I laughed out loud while watching it with a group of people. They are hilarious, some of the choices here, but this is where it like really starts to go downhill. And you'll hear me talk about the other ones, but like this is when we hit a point in the franchise where certain decisions were made earlier on, yet they make this movie about characters who technically are no longer here, and they find a way to intersperse them in the plot and feature them in the movie, and this happens for the next few movies, even though they are not alive, which I think that alone should be the biggest kind of red flag when it comes to everything in this movie. The traps here are entertaining, but there are plenty of characters who get what they deserve, so who's the real winner here? Coming in number 6, we have Jigsaw. Now, this was a movie I was interested going in because some people like it, a lot of people think it's like, and that's kind of how I feel about it. It's definitely an improvement over the past ones. I mean, it comes after Saw 4, 5, 6, and 7 or 3D. So yeah, it is better than that one, but in my eyes, it still looks like an almost fan-made movie. I mean, at least it looks like it's made by somebody who's held a camera before and knows how to focus and, depth of field and all this stuff. But it really just feels like something that you would find on YouTube when it comes to like people with very professional gear making a fan-made Saw movie. And there are moments here that are cool here and there, and some of the ideas are interesting, but again, there are these characters that are so one note, And you'll hear me say this a lot, but that's what makes a Saw movie so great. The characters, this film lacks it. Sure, there's some traps, but it's insanely forgettable. Coming in number 5, we have Saw number 2. Now, I think this is actually an unpopular ranking when it comes to where this film's placed. Most people place it higher, and for me, coming off of the first one, which I obviously will talk about, but without a doubt it's one of my favorite horror movies, then we go to Saw 2. There is a major quality drop. Now, I'm not saying the movie's bad, and I don't think it is terrible. I just think it's kind of mediocre at best. It was kind of funny because the whole time I was like, this guy just kind of seems like a shitty Mark Wahlberg. And then I found out it was Donnie Wahlberg at the end. But this film at least tries to make you care for the characters. And yeah, you do kind of get attached to the whole father-son thing. And then when stuff starts being revealed with all these people in the house, it's interesting. And I think that the terrible qualities of the later films made me appreciate this one more, but coming out of it, I was disappointed. Although I will say this one has one of the most disturbing traps that traumatized me as a young kid watching Watch Mojo, and that is the needle pit. That's a rough one. Coming in number 4, we have Saw number 3. Now, I think it is unpopular to put the third one above the second one, but for me, I was actually surprised that I enjoyed this one more, but it's because, as I said, the characters, they're more fleshed out here and more impactful in a way. Yes, the main kind of victim, well, one of the two, the male main victim here, is stupid and is so slow during this whole thing. He just like doesn't seem to be in a rush for anything, and that is like very apparent. You're just like, dude, why are you just like walking or just like going like this through it instead of trying to run from place to place like some other people do? And yeah, that definitely stands out here. But the dynamic between certain characters, who again I won't say for spoiler reasons, and certain characters being here and the way they introduce them and connect them all is very interesting. And this film actually has one of the most disturbing scenes for me, and that's like what I could call the surgery scene. And I don't know why that scene affects me more than like the traps, but yeah, I was like, that was the first time I was like actually turning away from the screen going, oh god, okay, this is like pretty brutal. Maybe it's because it felt realistic to me. But yes, there are plenty of problems with this movie, most of them being spoilers, but one of them is the whole switching between these plots and showing one at a time. Sometimes there's an imbalance of them and you want to see what's happening with the other one, and there's kind of a lack of consistency with it. But I surprisingly like this film more than some of the other ones. I don't think it's amazing, but when it comes to the Saw movies, it's on the better half. Coming in at number 3, we have Spiral. Now, Spiral feels like a nice side quest from the franchise. Chris Rock's character, Zeke, is very, very well fleshed out, and his arc is good in this movie. I think that's what really makes me enjoy this one more, because the traps here, they're interesting, but they're not the strong suit of the movie, which is totally okay. I'd much rather a character be a strong suit of a Saw movie or any movie than the violent traps. And McMurray from Letterkenny is in the opening of this, which I thought was pretty cool just for me watching it. But there's a nice, again, I don't want to say father-son connection, but Chris Rock's character, Samuel L. Jackson's character, interesting. One thing I will say that completely throws me off is the Jigsaw impersonator voice. It is horrible, and I know it's supposed to be different, but it throws me off every single time. It's something that I can never shake or get used to. And later on, some of the reveals aren't that shocking, which, I mean, that's just, I assume, because we're used to it. But I will say, in a few years, I could see myself revisiting this one. It's definitely one that I would consider a good movie, although it still isn't great because it is held back by some things. Coming in number 2 is Saw X. Now, I have a full review of Saw X that I will link down below. Make sure to check that one out. But very quickly, I think Saw X is obviously the best in the franchise since the first one. It's hard to say that when you have 10 movies into it, but again, when you have so many shit movies, it's not that much of a competition. But by focusing on John Kramer and really kind of making this film a slow burn in the start, I don't want to say slow burn, but more of a character study in the start, was a very interesting choice, and it worked for me, and it seems to work for most people because the reception this film is getting is surprising. And the fact that this director directed some of the early ones just blows my mind, because this film also looks amazing. It's edited so well, the way they cut away from some stuff and leave it up to your imagination. And then also show you some pretty gross, grotesque things. I mean, the sound design, I talked about it in my review, the sound design is absolutely brilliant, and there's lots I could say about this movie. There are some things here and there where I think it's a bit too long and they could have cut some things, but I go more in depth in my review. But overall, Saw X is a really good movie, but of course, number one has to go to the original Saw. I've talked about it a bunch. I did a watch along of this film last year, I think, or the year before, but I'm pretty sure it was last year. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite horror films of all time. It is a near horror masterpiece. There was so much that James Wan and Leigh Whannell were able to do with this film that is so inspirational. I was watching a behind the scenes thing maybe 5 days ago, 4 or 5 days ago, something like that. And just to see that the lack of time they had, I mean, this film was shot in 18 days. They got Carrie Elwes, they had Tobin Bell laying on the ground the whole time. It wasn't just like a model or something of it. They just were like, yeah, we're gonna lay you down here and we might step on you by accident while moving stuff. And they went on to make one of the most impactful and important horror films, without a doubt, of the past 25 years, but probably of all time. Obviously, it sparked a franchise with 10 movies in it, but when you go back to the first one, you see how simple the idea is, and that's what makes it so impactful. You realize that some of the big traps you think of, yes, there's the iconic reverse bear trap, which is just amazing, and some other traps here, if you've watched the movie, you know them all, but still, you don't get lost in them, and being stuck in the room with Dr. Gordon and Adam is so impactful. The way they shoot them, Gordon being on like a Steadicam and Adam being handheld. I mean, those are just IMDb fun facts for you, but it is just absolutely brilliant. It features one of the best twists of all time. If you somehow haven't seen it, I'm not going to say it, but you need to go out and watch it. It does not deserve the reputation that the later films got. Yes, it's bloody, there's some gross stuff, but nothing more than your average horror film, in my opinion. Saw is just, as I said, a near horror masterpiece. There's little problems I have, but I've also seen the movie 3 times and watch it every single year. So it's one of those like Nightmare on Elm Street. I hate the last like 2 minutes of that movie, and I can't give it 5 stars for that. But it's one of my favorite horror films, and maybe even films of all time. But anyway, there's my ranking of the Saw films. If you've seen them all, let me know your ranking down below, or just the ones you've seen. Trust me, you don't need to watch them all, but it is fun in a group of people. But there will be times where you will want to be hitting yourself for going, what am I watching? How did this even come about? But then you have some really great films like the original one, Saw X, you guys need to go see in the theater. And don't bring your kids, because somebody brought like a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old was like, is that a dream? Was he dreaming? Right before a torture scene. But thank y'all for watching. I will see you guys next time. Over and out.